man.
Jason,
Hey,
how you doing?
good. That was good. I thought I was going to be emotionally exhausted just because of how beautiful and heartbreaking and beautiful this book was. But man, I'm just charged.
Yeah, I mean, we had Jonathan Foster on. Lost his daughter when she was 25 in a car accident, and really does a deep dive into grief. And he does so in his new book called Indigo, which I love the title.
Yeah. I loved his way of describing it.
Yeah, that indigo is neither purple nor blue. It's kind of that color before the sun sets and darkness comes. Jonathan has some great insight on dealing with grief, and then also some insights about a God who knows how to understand and deal with our grief, and is open to our questions about him that challenge his own nature. We took a deep dive today, man.
Yeah. Let me read Paul Young's review. You can honestly write about grief if you've been there. Jonathan has been there and still carries its presence. Yes, this beautiful little book is about grief, but even more about life. I wept my way through it, and with every page I knew, I love this book. And I felt the same way. It was beautiful and devastating and beautiful. Another reviewer wrote that it was a broken hallelujah, and I felt that as well as I read through it. Just it's written as prose and as poetry, but there's just so much in it that's it's just beautiful. It's got humor, but it's raw and it's vulnerable, but it invites the goodness of God all the way. The mystery of His love is woven throughout the whole thing.
Well, and Jonathan challenges the system, the religious system that tries to kind of keep grief at bay, and be
or answer the question, somehow through the lens of control.
Yeah. Like, God needed them home for a reason, or those kind of cliche statements that literally do not help anyone with anything. I think the funniest one was someone asking him to listen to Christian radio for 90 days and thus he would be healed. Yeah, good luck with that. I might be more damaged after 90 days of that. But I love Jonathan. I love that he's asking big questions, but he's also so patient and open to listen and receive and kind of hit back and forth in this dialogue around grief. And I think it's going to help people who've suffered trauma and suffered things that in their life are devastating.
Yeah, and there's so much grace in this conversation for wherever you are in your theology, wherever you are in your journey. That's one of the things that I love about Jonathan, and somebody who's writing about love in the context of consent, right? I mean, there's just a whole lot of room and grace for wherever you are in this reconciling journey of love. So I loved this conversation. We just kept going. We were at an hour and 20 and finally started to wrap it up, realizing we could go another hour.
Well,
this guy.
It's worth every minute of it, and I know people are going to enjoy this. So
the book's called Indigo. You can be part of launching it. It's going to release in November. But he's got a campaign coming. There will be details as to how you can purchase the book, and through his website or through the Indiegogo campaign. We'll have that on the details, the descriptions. So
and hey, if you haven't already and you're listening to this, connect with us on our Facebook group. Rethinking God with Tacos Facebook group is vibrant, healthy, full of great conversation. I love the spirit and the vibe of what's happening over there. People are really helping one another. So sign up for the Rethinking God with Tacos Facebook page.
Go to the Facebook page and sign up at family story.org. on the mailing list because that we are having Talk Community Zoom calls more on a regular basis in the days ahead, and that's both through Facebook and through that email as a way to keep up and maybe be able to join us on a Zoom call. We're really loving connecting with folks. So
yeah, and as a listener-supported podcast, remember you can partner with us to give financially so that we can keep this podcast happening for people all over the world. You are invited into partnership with us, and we love those that have connected with us in that way, because it really helps to keep the podcast going and keep the word out there for people who are hungry and searching.
And if you're in the Charlotte area, join us on Saturday night at River Church. You can look it up. River Church. What is the website?
rivercharlotte.com.
rivercharlotte.com.
Or riverchurchcharlotte.com. They both work.
Hey, guys, love doing this. Hey, Derek, I love this is so good. Enjoy this. I think you're going to be blessed by this podcast with Jonathan Foster.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is good to have you. We were just talking about you're in Colorado, man. You're dressed for Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I like to dress to impress, so glad we got that covered.
You said you're going to go chop wood after we have this come.
I actually kind of need to. So we have a little cabin here in Morrison, Colorado. Tiny little thing. We get out here as much as we can. My boy plays football in Golden, Colorado, so we're here off and on all fall. And I literally do have wood I need to chop. So I've got the flannel shirt on. I do have an axe out there. So don't think that, I can't write a little poetry and also chop wood at the same time.
We thought it was a metaphor, but now we're really impressed.
It's really good to see you. Yeah, it's good to see you again, man. Good to have you on here again.
Thank you. Jonathan. It's great to be on again.
I'm so. We're going to dive into this new book, but I'm on your email list, and
good.
I look forward to it.
Good.
You're the grace and ease with which you write. I know it's not easy to write that way, but it's easy to read, and so much grace in life, man. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, first on the podcast, but then through your mailing list and this new book, man. It's beautiful and devastating and beautiful and absolutely transformative.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I just want to chime in here and say I've really been enjoying your podcast. You have some great guests on there, and I'd love for our Tacos listeners to head over to, it's a Choircast. You're part of the Choircast group there, right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Keith and
it's just
Matthew.
Jonathan
Jonathan_Foster. I tried to come up with a cool name, but all the cool names like Tacos and Theology were taken. So I was like, you know what? Let's just do Jonathan_Foster and call it a day.
It's so authentic. We're really happy about it.
It really works for you, Jonathan. It really works for you. That name especially. No, I love it. We just had Andre Robbie on. I didn't know that you guys knew each other. So that was a fun. I learning how you guys connected and.
That's right, Andre and I, one of the two odd anomalies in all of the human population to try to put Girard and open and relational theology together. So that's cool. He's a good guy.
Yes. Yeah. We talked about it a little bit, and thankful that you two are odd enough to have gone down that road for us, because there's so much life there. But hey, we want to talk about this new book, Indigo, and I know Derek can speak to this even more than me. But I'll do the quick introduction first. I know it's coming out soon, but maybe I've just been immersed in it over the last couple of days. It's prose, it's poetry, but it's about the loss of your daughter. It's about grief and how you navigated that. And it's raw. It's beautiful. There's so much profound understanding of who God is through the process as you wrestle it out. It actually has got humor. The idea of listening to Christian radio for 90 days had me laugh out loud. Your thoughts around that and the fact that might be in and of itself a hell, I resonated. But it's got a whole lot of everything, man, as a good author would give us. Speak a little bit to the book and maybe the inception, why you're here.
Yeah. Well, I'm here because you guys are cool enough and brave enough to have me back on. The book, like you said, comes about in the wake of lots of loss. It's been going on for a long time with my partner and I in our family. Lots of different, just absurd, crazy things. And then the most intense probably being the loss of our daughter. New Year's Day, 2015. She was a junior in college. And it happened, as these things do sometimes, in a heartbeat, and all of a sudden life was just literally completely different. So as Derek knows, but also I want to say too, like lots of listeners may have not lost a child or a close loved one, but we've all experienced loss. And sometimes especially I have noticed that some people are hesitant to like engage in a conversation with me at all for fear that they think that, that I might think that their loss is not as hard as mine. And so the reality is all of us are just dealing with our own stuff. So we can just say that up front, and it's not a competition. It's just, so I think all of this stuff is applicable everywhere. But yeah, for us, what I started to say was there's pre New Year's Day 2015, and then there's post New Year's Day 2015. And life, it's just never been the same and never will be. And so then I started wrestling with what that meant and who God was and, who I am. I mean, the existential questions that emerge out of something like this is so complex and it really never ends. So it's been a little over 8.5 years at this point, going on 9. But you don't get through it. You just try to figure out. At least the way I've approached it is I've just tried to figure out ways to carry it well. And the last thing I'll say here before we go on to whatever we want to talk about is that for me to carry it well really meant I had to kind of write about it. It's the way that I figure things out, if that's the way to say it. It's true with anything, but moving words around on a screen for some reason helps my heart and my soul. Crafting a sentence and then recrafting, because anyone who knows anything about writing, it's about rewriting, really. And even something like this, which feels a little stream of consciousness, and it was a little bit, but also it was months of reworking that stream. Yeah. So something about all that is helpful for me. I think, it helps me kind of set up the new boundaries and gives me some new space to play in. But yeah, the book just emerged naturally out of all of that. And because I want to wrestle with what this means about me and about God and my daughter and all the above.
Yeah. Let me just jump in and say that we want to know about the title of the book, Indigo. But before we dive into the name and title of the book, I just want to echo what you mentioned earlier, and that is that grief and loss and trauma is not a competition. Sure, you can outdo someone else's story as far as level of intensity and catastrophe, but everybody's suffering is relative. It's the worst thing they've been through, and the worst thing you've been through is the worst thing you've been through. So we can all relate on that level. And I think that's where your book really is so helpful in knowing everything you've been through it, and yet it's written in this poetic form. Jason added prose. I would add rap, and just it helps people navigate this this world we live in and this suffering that we are involved in, which, was promised. Actually, in this world you will have tribulation, Jesus said, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. My personal story is that I lost my wife and daughter to a drunk driver. I was in the car with him, felt a lot of survivor's guilt, was in a very strong word of faith context at that time. So there was a lot of denial that I felt I had to project in order to show that I was still in faith. But tell us about the title of the book. And then I want to ask you about this one of these opening lines here in Thunder. But tell us about Indigo. Why Indigo?
Well, at one level, indigo, I think, is just an evocative word. It's kind of cool. And if for no other reason, it's just been bouncing around in my mind the last couple of years. But then I started to think more about it. I love the fact that, like with indigo, you don't really know what color it is. Is it purple? Is it blue? I don't know. It's some gradation. It feels like it's changing. And with grief and my own processing of life, there's gradations and there's change. And then also it does make a brief appearance in the book. And it's kind of, I think, symbolic as the sun's going down and we're moving from indigo into black. So it kind of has that mystical, mystery kind of feel to it. So I think it's a combination of all those things. And originally for a little while, I was going to go with a subtitle, Theopoetics and the Color of Grief, because that's what I'm really interested in, the Theopoetics. But after a while and after interacting with a few people, I realized that was a little presumptuous or a little, I don't know, too something or other. And it just became pretty obvious that no, if people get it's Theopoetics, great. If they don't, it's great. It's just indigo, the color of grief. Seems to have a lot of symbolism to it.
Yeah, definitely cooler. I will attest to that. Cooler title. By the way, I saw the Indigo Girls when they were really at their peak in Madison, Wisconsin. So this is going to be
very different.
And the crowdfunder.
Good to hear them in the Barbie movie here recently.
Oh, really? Okay.
But
nice.
Yeah. So in this one of these opening poems, Thunder, you make this statement. I just want to read it for our audience. My daughter was a 20-year lightning strike, brilliant detonation across the backdrop of all that we are. It goes on to say, electricity of the past, throbbing beauty of the present. And I think that's absolutely descriptive of all the things that you're writing about in here. But could you share a little bit more about those statements?
Yeah, thanks for reading that. Writing that line meant a lot to me. It came after the prologue of the story is just a brief glimpse into when I was younger and being out in the mountains with my dad and being close to a lightning strike. And that strange, if anyone can relate to this or if anyone's experienced this, there's a strange moment right after, if you're close to lightning, where you can kind of still feel the energy in the air and in some cases even see the outline of it. It's weird how writing is. I mean, I did not set out to, I just was writing that and realized, oh my God, that's like my kid. She was a 20-year lightning strike. She's gone, but the edge of who she was is still so present. So it's like I'm constantly living in the wake of that energy and of that beauty, which is both similar to being close to a lightning strike. It's both terrible and beautiful at the same time. I think Jason mentioned devastating and beautiful, and that's what's going on. Yeah. And it's weird because she's not there, but she's still forming me. It's formless, but it's forming. It's absent, but it's present. So that's what's happening with that line.
Beautiful.
I love that. you're writing from that place of burning.
Hmm.
You know, if we're talking Emmaus Road, you're definitely providing us insights into the journey, but also revelation along the way, but all from a place of this heart. It's heart led. What you're writing, obviously, theopoetics, very much is going to come at us in that way. I got to be honest. I was only able to read a few stanzas, and I would have to put it down because I get emotional. It's not that it's a heavy read; it's that it's a beautiful read, but it's real, it's raw, and you're asking questions. I've got lots of things I highlighted, and I think I'm gonna read some things along the way and have you touch on it. But
sure,
I didn't take the title of this one, but it's you're meeting with the counselor at a grief or somewhere at a grief center. But the main character, familiar with loss, finds his friend Martin, who just lost a daughter, says, "I'd like to tell you it gets easier, but it doesn't. If there's any comfort, it's getting used to the pain, I suppose." And by the way, I'm pausing as I read this because of how you've written it. They're single lines, very much helping you even to digest the way that you want us to digest it. So I went to a grief seminar in Casper. Did you know that? I don't know why. I just wanted the bad to go away. I wanted answers to questions that couldn't be answered. And I could keep going. The counselor sits down with you and basically gives you the good and the bad. But I want you to speak to it. I had to pause there. Oh, by the way, I meant to tell you guys, at 2:18, let's pause for a second.
Now we know what it's all about. It's the emergency broadcast.
I totally meant to mention that, by the way, we're going to be interrupted with a...
that's all right.
All right.
Who knew?
I'll cut that out or maybe leave it in. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you got to leave that in, Jason. That's a historical.
Yeah. But
here we're talking about grief and loss, and we get the FEMA emergency broadcast signal.
Right.
I wanted to pause there and let you take it because the counselor tells you I've got some good news and some bad news. But the question, I wanted answers to questions that couldn't be answered. Isn't that the journey that all of us are on, the journey that Derek is talking about, that you can't compare it to the next person? We're all in the middle of some grief and some disappointment and some devastation, looking for answers that maybe aren't or to questions that maybe aren't available in this moment. And then how do you navigate that? And I'd love you to pick up a little bit of what was happening when you wrote this and the story behind it.
Well, the emergency alarm, first of all, reminded me how, it's so awkward in the middle of what you said. I've thought that so many times with death in my life. It gets so awkward. It happens, and it's just so weird. It doesn't fit. So maybe it's fitting that something that doesn't fit just got inserted into the middle of our conversation. So you're referencing, actually, that's a quote from a movie, Wind River, that's been out for probably 4 or 5 years ago. So it wasn't me as a counselor. It was the main character who had experienced a loss. In this case, it was her daughter. Now talking to his friend Martin, they just found out that their daughter had died. And it's a really, really touching, beautiful story. It's a little bit graphic, but I've watched it 3 times just because I don't know why. It's helped me. It's helped me in my grieving process, something about the way it plays out and the way the main character is internalizing and metabolizing, loss and grief. And so, he tells his buddy, about his little interaction with the counselor and how he wanted answers that really couldn't be questioned. But in the end, he just, he tells his friend Martin, he says, you got to take the pain. You can't deny it. You can't pretend it's not there, basically. You take the pain, Martin. You hear me? You take it. Because if you don't, it'll kill all the other memories that you have, every last one. So you learn how to take it. And I love that whole piece, probably for lots of reasons. I suppose one of them is the show is a lot of these grief things, how do I say this? Us masculine types we don't grieve very well. We don't know how to talk about these things very well. And so one of the things about the show is it's a very masculine show, but it's very vulnerable and authentic. I think that's what I like about it. And what I liked about his advice, not that I need masculine advice over feminine advice necessarily, but something about it really rang true, and it's been true with me too. There's a part of this that you just, you have to own, and you have to figure out how to carry well, and it's an honorable thing to do that. It's not particularly honorable, not to cast shame upon anyone who might be listening who isn't necessarily doing this, but I don't think it's particularly honorable to deny the pain and to pretend it's not there. In the end, I think that's damaging. It doesn't help anybody. So I love that part about the show, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and I was having a conversation, and this is, sorry, Derek, he missed it yesterday, but with Bradley Jerzak, and Derek ended up, his power ended up going out yesterday. So,
oh no!
But I was talking with, and it reminded me of we were talking about how so often my experiences are incongruent with what I believe about God. Even the stuff that at this point I know is, God is love. Some of these places that are places of faith for me. And when it comes to even this conversation around pain and, I'm, or disappointment or whatever the sorrow is you're navigating, to be able to know a God that is love and then have experiences incongruent with how you would think love operates or moves. I mean, that would be woven throughout this entire book, is that wrestling match. And even in that question, you're looking for answers. Well, ultimately, you're looking to answers. You're crying out to the heavens. And if you don't know his name, but even if you do know his name, and you did have a relationship with God. You had encounters. You knew who Jesus was, and suddenly you're in the midst of this. That's part of what's going on in this writing. But maybe speak to that a little bit in light of this, even this film, because I find for me, I think in that theopoetic. That's how I'm wired. I'm that right brain kind of, and so films resonate. Just a piece of literature, just one sentence can all of a sudden change everything for me. And I process by writing and moving words around. I might write a sentence and then spend 4 hours over the next 2 months on that one sentence until it actually speaks to me and helps me understand and grasp this mystery of a good father in the context of my experience. Maybe speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, when something like this happens, and no matter who you are and what your background is, it's going to invite you to rethink, reapproach your ideas about whatever it is you've been building your life upon up until that moment. We are all, I think, essentially meaning-making creatures. That's what we do. And so irrespective of your religion or your politics, we've all spent our life up until now trying to, make order out of the chaos and the disorder. And for a lot of us, certain things work. And if it's working for you, I think you should just basically, unless you're hurting with someone, you should just run with it until you may run up into something where it doesn't work anymore. And if that's the case, the invitation that the universe or God or something has extended is for you to kind of reapproach that. And I think, again, the word honorable comes to mind. I think it's a really honorable way to spend your life as a human being, is to try to figure out what these things, what they kind of mean. And it's not that we ever get the final answer. I don't think that that's probably ever possible. But there are healthier and unhealthier ways to go about, getting to moving on down the journey. Richard Rohr says something like, I think it's Richard Rohr, how you get there determines where you go. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, it's just making my brain.
A lot of grace.
Yeah, a lot of grace. Like there, you don't have to get to point whatever. There's no coercion. There's no forcing. Life is life, and you have no idea what's going to happen to you. And some of us go through a lot of stuff, and so I think, I love the grace and the space to just navigate it and journey and sit with it if you need to, or walk with it if you need to. And there's something really beautiful about all of that I think honors our humanity, and ultimately I think also honors, I started to say honors God, but actually I think my theology now is that God is honoring us. Like, it's so entangled and enmeshed. It's not that God is separate from us, watching us like, oh, isn't this guy doing a good job? God is what I think is that God is that thing inside of me that is helping me do this very thing. So it's a mutual honoring going on at the same time.
Yeah, it honors the relationship. Maybe is a way of saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also, I mean, man, so many thoughts, but I do believe God is honoring us in that He was willing to take on flesh to experience death. When you talk about death being awkward, I would probably up the ante on that and say that ultimately death was supposed to be illegal. And that's why it's awkward. That's why we hate it. That's why we struggle with it. And yet the most awkward and illegal thing that was imagined in the heart of God is now something that He entered into by becoming one of us. And in Jesus, we see the ultimate picture of a co-suffering God. I would push back on one little thing about comparison, and that is, I think you can compare. And if you choose to use your trauma and grief and tragedy as a means of comparison, which I think some people do, and it really keeps them stuck in a moment. There's a U2 song where they talk about being stuck in a moment. And it really resonates with me, because if you
get yourself together, you've been stuck in a moment. There you go.
That's it. You nailed it. You nailed it. And so and I found myself getting caught in this trap in my own situation. And when you play the comparison game, you basically, I can top other people's story, but it really doesn't make me feel any better. And here's the thing that it cuts me off from. It cuts me off from the kind of empathy that could enter into anybody's tragedy and situation, no matter how hard or how easy it may seem. I mean, look, I could probably make someone feel a lot better about like failing a math class in college by sharing my story, like, oh, well, yours is way worse. I shouldn't feel so bad about that. But then I cut myself off from empathy with that person and connection with that person. And I think what you're getting at, Jonathan, is that these griefs, these tragedies, these points of trauma are opportunities for empathy and connection with people, because we can connect around that. And guess who else can connect around that? His name is Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and He hung on a cross, and His death, obviously we have greater assignment to what that caused and what that did, and His resurrection, but it also is a point of empathy with us, to where He knows what it's like to be you. And having that is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. You mentioned something, one of our contributors on Tacos, Rethinking God with Tacos Facebook page, Joe Chadburn, mentioned this, that he was raised in a culture where boys were taught through words, but mostly example, to deal with grief through denial, suppression, anger, violence, addiction, and self-sabotage. His question is basically, how do you deal with grief? What is the right way to deal with grief? And I know you get at that in your book in a kind of a backdoor way, but if you're just giving someone a straight answer today, how do you deal with this kind of grief that comes?
Yeah, well, basically stare at the ceiling for about 8 years, and you write several books, and you finish degrees and get a dissertation, and you get kicked out of a denomination, and you take long hikes, and you talk about it endlessly, and you think about it, and you watch movies like Wind River. It never, I think maybe saying all that means, first of all, like I just don't let it, I started to say I don't let it go. I mean, it doesn't let me go, so I'm not sure what that means exactly, other than I know a lot of people just try to do what we've already kind of referenced, which is, especially in Christian world, try to deny it and be overcomers and be victorious. And, because that's the story we've been given, especially American Protestant, masculine dominated, Caucasian dominated kind of theologies. So there's 100 different ways to answer it. I think just be authentic with yourself, but I think being honest is a big deal. A lot of us don't want to be, because to admit that I've experienced loss is a really vulnerable, risky place, and our society does not reward that. Hell, our churches half the time don't reward that. And when you're like, even as a pastor, they'll reward it for a few weeks or a few months, maybe a couple years, but after a while, you're going to be asked to basically move on. So I think it takes real strength and courage to stick with it and just to be honest about it. Sorry, that was a rambling answer, but I think the honesty piece is important.
No, that's great. Well, and what I hear in your answer too is to keep walking, keep moving, keep living, stare it in the face.
Yeah, movement is super important. Sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say thank you for saying that. Like, I've thought multiple times, exercising is a way I exorcise this particular demon, this particular pain, and all of the time, all of the time, like every day. Usually it's late in the afternoon, but I have to get up and go take a run, go take a walk. Yesterday, because we're out here in Colorado, I was, able to enjoy a long hike. I don't know. I don't think I could have done any of this without that movement of just trying to get in the flow of and to exercise that stuff out. So yeah, thanks for saying that.
That's you can go chop some wood.
Exactly.
But
in my flannel shirt.
Exactly. But but my wife has, over the years, she's clued into that. There will be days when she'll come over and go, "Hon, I think you need to go on a run."
Mm-hmm.
Or I think you need to go work out for a little while, and she'll catch it before I will, as I'm wrestling through some frustration or disappointment or disconnection.
Right. Or similarly, take a rest, take a nap. It's hilarious how these simple things are so important. Movement, rest well, drink, eat.
Yeah.
All of that's been reinforced in my life, just trying to pay attention to those little things and to kind of stay in my lanes.
Yeah.
Because if those things get messed up, I don't have a chance.
Here will I sing. Oh, oh, oh. Man, Derek, I love doing this with you. Love what God is doing in and through our lives, the connection, the reconnection over these last years, what the favor in life on Rethinking God with Tacos, whether it's the Facebook group or the Zoom calls and the ones we have in the future, just life-giving, and a fulfillment of the vision that I had 9 years ago when we stepped away from pastoring full-time to start a Family Story Ministries. A Family Story Ministries was meant to create content catalytic for an encounter with the love of God. I mean, it was that simple, and it was very empowering for me to then lean into writing, lean into obviously speaking and teaching, and led to the start of this podcast almost 5 years ago. A Family Story is a nonprofit and it's been the home for me for 9 years as we've leaned in. And so,
and I remember you saying, coming out of COVID, that, hey guys, we started a podcast.
And you and Sarah were one of our earliest guests.
Yeah. And it definitely is content that is catalytic for an encounter with the love of God. We've experienced that by joining forces together.
Yep.
But I want all of our listeners to know that this is a listener-funded podcast, and Rethinking God with Tacos has kind of taken on a life of its own in the umbrella of a family story. But a family story is your livelihood, Jason. I get a salary from the church that I pastor, and I donate my time and volunteer my time to do this. But I want everybody to know that you can give to make Rethinking God with Tacos available to as many people as we can possibly make it available to. If this podcast has in any way blessed you, helped shape your rethinking journey, and been a safe place to experience community on the Facebook page, then I invite you to give, not out of compulsion or arm twisting, but out of joy and generosity. Give into a family story. You can do it at afamilystory.org. There's a giving function on there. And we invite you into partnership with us. It's a way that we can partner together to establish the kingdom of God through this podcast. And I love doing it with you, Jason. I really do.
Yeah, same here, man. Thank you. So grateful for those who have given and who blessed us and have prayed for us and partnered with us over the years. So love it. Love doing this with you. And we'll see you all soon. You mentioned the lack of patience that you run up against, and this is where I think you talk about a lunch at one point and someone telling you to get over it. I didn't write that part down, but I did write down the eyes narrowing. I challenge you to listen to Christian radio, nothing else, for 90 days. I'm assuming that you said, I smiled awkwardly. Is that you? Mm-hmm. And then nothing. Stood there as they walked away, thinking how awful it would be to listen to Christian radio, nothing else, for 90 days. I laughed out loud when I when I read that, because I thought, oh God, you want a description of hell? And that's not knocking a Christian radio, but for 90 days, nothing else.
Yeah, and bless their hearts. I don't think I could tolerate it for 90 minutes.
But that's the humorous one. But yeah, there were other examples of callousness based on, I think, what we understand about who God is, and therefore no grace or patience for anybody on their journey. Maybe share a little bit of that.
Anyone who's gone through bad things have had people say dumb things to them. That's the opening line of the little chapter, or whatever I call these little headings. And then I list 4 or 5 really common things that probably a lot of people have heard, experienced themselves. Everything happens for a reason, or, sorry, your friend died. God needed him there more than here, just stuff like that. So I guess first I want to say that I think most people say these things with good intentions. They don't know what else to say. And it's just, again, so awkward for them. They're trying to make meaning out of it. And so what they do is they default to this kind of quasi-religious system that has given them these kind of easy answers. So I don't want to be disrespectful to any one person. As I say in the writing, I'm happy to be disrespectful towards the system that requires us to think such shallow, puny thoughts, as if God had to orchestrate, for example, my sister's murder, or my best friend's death, or my daughter's death, or any number of things that I talk about in the book. Like that God needed to do that in order to make me a better person, which is what people told me. And it's what the system tells you. We don't need a God like that. I don't want a God like that. We have plenty of those kind of gods in our world. That's not even hard. Us humans do that all the time, It's silly, and it's constrictive, and it's the opposite of what you were talking about, the patience and the grace And so in my journey, I've just noticed that I keep over the years being attracted to things that open me up and go more expansive rather than the other way, which is, inward and constrictive in like a cul-de-sac. I don't want a cul-de-sac. I want to on-ramp to new things and go to new places.
Good.
And again, movement. And I really genuinely believe that the spirit of love is in the midst of all that, and that the opposite, well, it's antithetical to love, and it's antithetical to being a human. It's the Antichrist. It's denying, that these things have an effect upon us and maybe have an effect upon God too, and that God is all entangled with it. So I've had interesting pushback to that particular chapter. Some people think I was too harsh, on the religious, and I might have been. I think the only spot in the whole book that's slightly preachy is maybe in that. But also, I think maybe I felt that because, first of all, it angers me that the systems have put so many of us in really absurd positions. And also, I know a lot of people too. I'm trying to be an advocate for people who don't really necessarily have the language and are trying to figure out why they're frustrated by their system. And so I hope that as they read this, that they'll gain the freedom and the language to say, oh yeah, this is why when so-and-so said this to me, it didn't sit right. It's because theologically it doesn't make sense, that it's not the kind of God that I'm interested in.
It's offensive. It's actually, I love what you say, that it's good intentioned. I remember, I wrote God is not in control, and I opened it up by telling a conversation I had in my early 20s, still in Bible college, with a coworker who's wanting to hear about my relationship with Jesus. So I am telling her about the wonder of love and the relational God and a provider, and I can see, you've been in those conversations where whatever was going on in her heart was soaking up what I was sharing. Mm-hmm. And then she asks the question that everyone asks at some point, well, if God is so good, why does child abuse happen? And she asked that question. I didn't have the answer then, and I reached, out of good intention, for what I'd been given. Yeah. And I said, God's in control. That was the best thing I could give her. And I literally watched her move, and I knew it wasn't satisfying me to say it.
Didn't ring true even with you as you were saying it. Yeah.
It didn't ring true to me, but it was the only thing I had. And so I was with good intention, but when I said it, I watched her turn from hope to sorrow and then rage, and she said, I can never follow a God who allows child abuse. And that was it. That was the end of that conversation. We never had it again. And of course, that would be a completely different conversation now. And so I have grace, but I love what you're saying. The system itself, the way that I'd been taught to perceive the sovereignty of God, had boxed me in to not be able to say, you know what, I don't know. Because at the time I didn't know. But if I could have just said that and said, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. I just know that he loves us. I mean, that would have been enough for us to continue the conversation. And so that's what you're doing in that chapter for me. When I read through it, I'm sensing there's a grace there, but you are challenging. And I love how you say it, the system.
Yeah.
Or the lie of separation, which, by the way, I know Derek's got something, but I do want to get to from solidarity, because the way you write about hell, I want to read the whole thing.
Nice.
Because there's the lives. There's some brilliant insight.
I want to read a chapter about hell. Nice. I like it.
Well, you know what I'm talking about, right? You know what I'm referencing?
I do.
I can read it now, or Derek, if you've got some thoughts. I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just love the freedom to say I don't know, as opposed to feeling the pressure. And I do agree. I think it's a system pressure. It's a either voiced or unvoiced expectation that we should have answers to every question about a God that's unfathomable in terms of his depth of love, but is identified in his becoming flesh. And why we don't default to that, I don't know. I mean, I think that's the simplest thing for me, is to point back to Jesus and say, well, yeah, we do have a God that understands what it's like to be us. And, oh, by the way, he has chosen to be in it with you. He was there in the suffering. The fact that it wasn't prevented or stopped or halted doesn't mean that he was incapable or he was unwilling. It just means that he was there with you in it. And for whatever reason, love requires consent. And when we follow the logic of love requiring consent, then we have a God that's not necessarily in control in the way we define control. But we have a God who is loving till the end and faithful till the end. And no matter where that end is, love will never fail. So, I have a definite, different thinking and definition on the sovereignty of love and what it means for God to be in control. I think I could better answer people in that. But, there's a chapter before Jason goes into hell, which, by the way, I think the road to hell is paved with good intentions, isn't it, Jason? All these people with good intentions. Anyway, I digress. In your poem Early, you bring up one of my favorite authors, Elie Wiesel, and I read the book Night at least once a year just to kind of get grounded again. It's a devastating book. In fact, you say it is stunning, if not sickening, is the language that you put in there about Elie Wiesel's book Night, his description of the Holocaust and the things that he saw. But one of the statements, and I'll just read it because I'd like you to speak to it, because I think it has such a dual meaning, and it's helpful for people who are in suffering and grief. But in this statement, you said, tried to imagine the absurdity of such violence, tried to imagine the beauty of Wiesel's writing amid absurdity of such violence. Didn't reopen the book that day. I don't know. Seemed disrespectful to move on too quickly, to read further, to possibly forget that what Wiesel wanted us to remember. So that call and response, where is God? Where is God? He's there, hanging on the gallows with those boys. It stuck with me throughout the day. Of course, you're referring to the statement in Wiesel's book where the cry, where is God, rang out through the crowd when they saw the boys hanging in the gallows. And the response was, God is there. He's hanging with those boys. And for me, that could mean a couple things. Number one, for me now, it means that, God knows what it's like to be me. He has experienced and tasted death on my behalf and is willing to go to the depths for me. It could also mean that God is dead. The God that could have prevented, should have prevented, but didn't prevent this from happening is dead to me. And I refuse to follow and serve and worship a God that condones that kind of behavior or allows that kind of behavior with the power to stop it. Those are very difficult themes to deal with, but I think they must be dealt with. And I love that you brought Elie Wiesel's book into this. I hope everybody goes and reads Night by Elie Wiesel after this. Oh, and of course, Indigo.
That's right. But if you had to choose, go with Night. Bring the story.
Nobody has to choose.
What of that?
Right, that's true. You don't have to choose. Just do both. Do both. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just do both.
Derek?
No, I just bringing that theme and that story into it for me was so brave, because it opens up the big questions that we have and that we should have about God, and that God's not afraid of us having. That's I think the thing that the system tries to push down and tamper down is like, well, there's certain things that are off limits and you can't know, and it's a mystery, and so don't touch it. Just let God be God. And when you relegate everything to the realm of mystery, and of course there's mystery, but there's also a God who wants to be found and discovered because he found and discovered us in our loss and our grief and our sorrow. Mm-hmm. So I love the tension between those things. I've learned to really love the tension between those kind of things because it grounds me. It makes me more empathetic.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, the mystery piece is really weird, isn't it? It's like if you start to offer some responses that are different than what the religious system has heard previously, they will often respond by saying, well, it's all a mystery anyhow, and you can never really know. And it's a bit of a cop-out. Again, probably well-intentioned people. Again, the road to hell is paved with well-intentions, good intentions. Because none of us really, yes, we do live by mystery, but we also all, every day, try to figure out everything as much as we can. So when people are quick to play the mystery card, what they're normally doing is just saying, oh, your response is just, I can't quite handle that. The intensity of my response reminds them of the very things that you're talking about, Derek, like of the weightiness and the heaviness and the existential like chaos that some of these questions bring up. And people have already decided, they've figured out how to make meaning kind of in their life, and they've been building on that, and it just becomes too much to unwind it. And so it's very, very frustrating, but it's also, just an opportunity for me to try to take a breath and be patient with them. But yeah, the Elie Wiesel story, it was so much a part of the story. On the day that my kid died, I was reading that. I literally was reading that story that morning and read about those three Hebrew boys being hung on a gallows, and Wiesel and his what do we call them? They're not, they were prisoners, but I guess that's what they were. Had to march underneath them, and as they did, he hears a voice say, "Where is God?" And then another voice, and I don't remember exactly. I don't know if he says it was an actual voice or a voice in his head, but either way, the response was, "Where is God? He's hanging there on the gallows." And of course, when I read that, it just made me stop and think, and I closed the book, and the rest of the day, I just thought that was just, what a weird, what is going on here? This is just weird. God is hanging on the gallows, and of course, as a Christian, I can't help but think of the Son of God hanging on the cross. So the stories kind of overlap, and then later we find out the news about our daughter being killed, and so then later that night, I have that same call and response in my head, and I hear, "Where is God?" And the response is that either comes from within or whispered from without. I don't know. The response is, "Where was God? He was in the car dying with Quincy." Quincy was our daughter's name. So, it's so much a part of our story, a part of what happened to me that day, before, during, and after. It was so weird that, there was no chance it wasn't going to be in this thing. And it's also really beautiful at the same time, like you said, because it's another way of introducing these really important questions. And I don't know that anyone in the last century has introduced those questions better than Elie Wiesel. Just a brilliant, brilliant writer. And I've always really enjoyed writing, which won't surprise you now that you've read Indigo. I've always really enjoyed writing where you said as much as you could with as little words as you could. Now, you may not recognize this if you've heard me preach or had a conversation with me. I probably use too many words. But so I've always enjoyed that. And so Night and Elie Wiesel does that as well as anyone. So it's kind of a really meaningful way to line all these things up together. But it was a really big part of how this whole thing got started for me.
I love that I sang something with his little words. I started out writing as a songwriter, which you have very little real estate when you're writing songs, and that's translated into writing as well. Part of what I do is edit other people's books, and it typically, most of the time, I'm being handed books where three sentences are being used where one is needed, and so it's wonderful when I get a book where that's already been done. Then I get to.
Well, I might have gone over the edge
but,
on this one because we just pulled all kinds of stuff out, but yeah, you can't accuse me of that on this one.
This is my love language. No, you can't. This is my love language. When I read this, I'm like, oh, and even how it's structured. But I want to.
By the way, that's what I loved about old Twitter. You only had 160 characters. You had to keep it brief.
Right.
Yeah, definitely can't accuse me of that when I preach or on this podcast. I because we talked hell, I want to circle back because everybody listening is like, wait a sec, what? But maybe I'll throw this thought, even in light of what we were just talking about. You kind of talk about hell in the context of chaos, and hell is is an experience we have here on earth. I mean, and so hell is these broken places, where death has touched us and the injustice of life. But I'm going to read a good, because you reframe in the context of loss. You reframe some of our thoughts here. So I'm going to pick up in a little bit. I'm going to read it a little bit, and then maybe you can speak to it. From, I think it's called Solidarity. Is that right?
It's somewhere in there, yeah.
I think hell is, yeah. I can't see you right now. Your camera's off.
Did my camera go away?
Slow, but.
Is it just the Wi-Fi?
No.
It'll be fine, but it's just,
okay.
Just the Wi-Fi. So, anyway, I think hell is a space we created and continue to create out of our misinterpretation of the chaos. The misinterpretation led us to consider the divine as separate from us. But separateness is an anti-reality. That'll preach. And in our confusion about reality and anti-reality, scarcity slithered in. There's a good word. And emphasized our shame and despair. All of it coalesced and continues to coalesce to create hell. I don't talk this way to try and diminish the consequential reality of such a place. No, I think hell is a terrible fire that burns. I just think love is a fire that burns too. Maybe hell is the burning of love's invitation to be embraced. And I mean, you continue on, but I highlighted that last sentence. Maybe hell is the burning of love's invitation to be embraced. There's so much there, even in the words that you used, the scarcity slithered in. But the idea that what hell is, when I got in trouble, it was because I started rethinking through the lens of who God is, more in the context of hell here on earth, and the way you describe it as chaos. And the divine as separate, as an anti-reality. Maybe share a little bit of that in light of the journey, because I would imagine that a lot of your rethinking around hell happened during this season. Is that right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Not initially, but what kept happening is as I committed to love, and I think probably the best thing I can say about God is that God is love. I don't know any of these things for sure, but I think that that's what's happening, and it's what I certainly want to be committed to. So as I committed to love and kept reframing and reapproaching love and unpacking it and redefining it and saying, no, it's not about living by the myth of redemptive sacrifice. It's not about bloodshed. It's not about God needing you to do this or that. It's more about consensual things and autonomy and agency and all of these other things. The more I tried to talk about love, the more others started bringing up hell to me. I was really shocked So I wound up thinking and talking about hell more in about a 2-year period than I had my whole life, because the religious people kept pushing back against the love. So I just talk about love, and they kept wanting to talk about hell. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? I'm talking about love. We talk about hell so much. It was like, I would get the question so often, do you believe in hell? Like, this is a weird question to me. No, I believe in God. It was almost like a creed, like a mantra. I believe in hell. Some of these people believe in hell so much that has become their God. It's this punishment, retributive, hellish thing. So it's interesting. To answer the question, no, initially I didn't really. I was just going after love, but the religious system put me in a position where I had to rethink it. And so I have rethought it, and I don't know if I have it right, but chaos, so what I think is that chaos has always been with us, and that actually chaos itself is amoral. It's a creative agency, but that it is a part of God, and God is a part of it, and that God is in the middle of it, inviting and luring the different facets of chaos into something better. But at times, chaos, because there's agency and autonomy and free will, and I'm not even talking just about humans here, I'm talking about all matter. What I imagine is that, like a particle doesn't have agency in the same way that a human does, or a badger doesn't have it the same way that a tree has it. They're all different, but there's something about being a badger, there's something about being a tree, there's something about being a particle, that there is response and reciprocal activity and energy. And somewhere in there, I loosely think of it as having a will and agency and having some kind of experience. And so I think that chaos has always been around. And as these different types of matter potentially push back against the luring of love, the invitation of love, that there's something that can coalesce around anti-love that becomes, it's anti-God. It's not what God would want. And initially it might be somewhat benign, but if it keeps going, it can metastasize, and it can build on itself. I get into this a little bit with Theology of Consent. Now, there's a chapter in there about the text. I call it the texture, and it's the movement back and forth. And it's I'm probably not talking about it super eloquently, but I'm trying to bring in chaos as an amoral thing, but too much of it as it builds up can turn immoral and can push against God. And when that happens, there is a type of hell that begins to develop. And it's like you said, I think that's right. There's a hell going on this earth. Whatever hell is in the next dimension, like none of us actually technically know, but we all know of hell going on in this dimension.
Sure.
And what I became convinced of is you're not going to really be worried about heaven or hell down the road if you're not worried about it now. It's not like we're going to die and then all of a sudden, now we're going to. In fact, we're already in eternity. Eternity is already happening. Eternity doesn't start at some later date.
Yeah.
So I think the real thing is to try to bring it back to this moment. And so those are the kinds of things I'm trying to get at, and that, that heaven and hell can be happening in this moment. I don't know. There's a lot that's in those few words. So
yeah, I'll say this. I know that we're Derek, but first of all, yes. My thought is if Jesus prayed on earth as it is in heaven, he seemed pretty interested in what does it look like to live with the kingdom at hand or within us here now. That was the invitation. He didn't say let's think about the kingdom of heaven from when we get there. It was it looks like union. It looks like oneness. But I also would have to say this. you just described my journey in a way that you just helped me say it succinctly. I had the exact same experience. I'm mesmerized by love, and the more convinced that I was, and the more I chased it down, suddenly I found myself being attacked around I came to literally met people where I thought, man, you're not saved by grace through faith. You're saved by grace through faith if you believe in hell. Like, this is the thing that's driving. It was
crazy.
astounding. And so I did the same thing. For 2 years, I suddenly was having a conversation about hell that I wasn't even interested in having. And the same thing was, do you believe in hell? I'm like, how do you even ask that question? It doesn't even make sense. But it's very similar to that journey of 2 years where I went, I guess I got to figure out what I think about hell.
Yeah.
So a very, very helpful synopsis of those 2 years, and it's bled over into the podcast for sure. But anyway,
that is a strange phenomenon, that the deeper you go in love, the more pushback you get about hell. I mean, it's uncanny.
Yeah.
I've experienced the exact same thing, and I guess my best answer is, Jesus said he'd build his church and the gates of hell would not prevail against it. So how about we just stick with that?
Yeah.
And I don't care what it is, but Jesus wins. So let's talk about love. It reminds me of just the first part of Genesis when it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth became without form and void. And that Hebrew terminology there is like tohu vabohu, something along those lines. I can't remember the pronunciation, but became chaotic and unruly and out of order. First of all, there's a time dimension possibly there that, God created it in good. He created it in order. He created it well, but it became this way. And I personally believe that God has zero to do with evil. In fact, if God partners with evil to produce good, which the evangelical church would probably embrace 100%. Well, he created the smith that blows the coals in the fire, and he knows how to harden Pharaoh's heart, and all these biblical literalists that come at you. If God has anything to do with evil, and if God, personally, I'd rather be in hell than worship a God that sends people there. This is where I think that we've got to start just overemphasizing love, the love of God that's unconditional, that embraces all, that does set things in order and does require consent and is not necessarily in control the way we ascribe to control. A God who is interested in the communion of all, and I think that's a beautiful thing. One of our Facebook people mentioned an article.
Taco Facebook.
I just want to read a little bit of it here real quick. Taco Facebook people, Taco Community, our Taco Community.
Taco Community.
Sorry, I'm still getting
part of that, Jonathan.
It's so new. I'm still getting it down.
I need to get on. Yeah.
He says we are surrounded at the altar. You need to join us. Join us. Come on there. It's a great conversation. We are surrounded at the altar every Sunday by all those who rejoice with us, but upon another shore and in a greater light. That multitude which no one can number, whose hope was in the Word made flesh, and with whom is the Lord Jesus, we are evermore as one. As we recite the creed and join in the prayers of the people, if you are in grief, please ponder joining me behind the altar for the Eucharist prayers. It's that communion of the saints. It's that act of oneness in receiving the bread and the blood. And of course, it's a symbol, but I think there's also something more powerful in it, and that is that we have become one and all in Christ, and Christ has become one and all in us. And to wake people up to that reality is going to happen with an overemphasis on love and not an overemphasis on hell, whatever it is. Jason's right. I for 18 years, I don't think I ever preached hell in my church. Not once. Never. And yet, the more radical and dogmatic I get about love, that God is love, and what love is, the more pushback I get in those areas. And it's almost like, well, you can't be a Christian if you don't believe in hell. It's like, really? Okay, well, then I'm not a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. You go on being a Christian, and I'll be a follower of Jesus. Because Westboro Baptist thinks they're followers of Jesus, and I don't. So, I don't know. I feel like this thinking and dealing with grief in a very spiritual way, by having empathy with people and being with them. And it reminds me of a story. A little girl comes home from school and her mom's like, "Hey, Susie, why are you late? You're 30 minutes late." "Well, my friend Sally lost her doll." She's like, "Oh, well, did you help her find her doll?" And she goes, "No, I just sat on the curb and cried with her." And sometimes I think that's the better answer. That's the better way, is just to say, "Hey, let me just be here with you. I don't have to say anything. I can just cry with you, and that's okay." I was told by a very esteemed leader in Christian ministry that when my wife was killed by a drunk driver and she was 7 months pregnant, "Well, you just got beat at the game of life." And my faith muscle kicked in. It's like, "Oh, well, damn it, I'm never going to get beat at the game of life again. Here we go. I'm going to be Mr. Faith Man." Well, really, what I didn't need that. I just needed a hug. Like, don't say any words. Just give me a hug. And I know that now. But I really wish more people would kind of learn that kind of empathy instead of having to be certain about everything and know everything. I don't know. I'm just rambling. So, Jonathan, I want you to say some more words about that. Why we get so much pushback in this area.
Yeah. I think people are just trying to cope, and they don't realize, I'm sorry to use the word they, because we all do it. I've done it. We just don't realize probably how much we've built our coping mechanism upon fear and punishment and rewards in the other way. And so when those of us who have been convinced that that this thing is set up in different ways, when we begin to speak this way, it just freaks people out. And and especially if you're a pastor.
Say that phrase again.
Which phrase?
That phrase, built our coping mechanism on fear and punishment, because we all have a coping mechanism, which isn't even wrong.
No, right.
It's how we navigate.
It's who we are. It's what humans
There's so
do.
much grace. Yeah. It's and so it releases empathy for me because I realized as I was navigating this pushback, I have a little less grace for the folks that maybe carry a title, but I just have I maybe hold them have a little higher expectation. I'm looking for kindness, but boy, that coping, that statement, so much life on that, Jonathan.
Yeah, I relate to that too. The people who their paycheck is really attached to, adhering to a certain set of things, I have less patience for myself. Totally get that.
Yeah, me too.
But it's a human thing, and it's what, unfortunately, it's what American Christianity has done. It's where we find ourselves. And so I think it is our invitation to lean into that and to try to give an alternate way of living. And as we often say, sometimes we need to use words to do that. But a lot of the times we just need to be... I'll just speak for myself. I need to just continue to be better at holding space for all of the antagonism that people want to bring in and project in. And especially if you're a pastor or a leader of any kind, there's all kinds of projection and transference going on. And it's really, which is part of the reason I got into mimetic theory, it's really difficult sometimes to discern, who I am and who the other person is, and it gets very convoluted. So to the degree that we can all create a more expansive interior to hold all this stuff And even as I'm saying that, I'm using my arms and I'm spreading them out. It makes me think of Jesus on the cross. It's not the place where the world gets fixed. It's the place where God holds everything together.
So good.
Wow.
Father, forgive them. They know not what they do is maybe the most profound thing he ever said.
Yeah.
In this context, it's like, well, this sure shit seemed like they knew what they were doing. But isn't it beautiful that he's in this place of, no, I'm not in the sin counting game. I see through their coping mechanisms, and I'm speaking a better word. It's so much grace there, man.
Yeah.
So much. That's so good. That's the gospel that changes things.
Yep. And it requires, unfortunately,
that, transforms us.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is not what I signed up for, really. I signed up to get the salvation and get the completeness, and then to go preach it and to tell people and to write about it and to help.
And they gave you a degree probably to do that.
Right. But then somewhere in there in the middle of all this, they got mixed up, and I realized I was being invited to actually kind of like be like Jesus and have my arms extended and be vulnerable and to show a better way without, in the midst of vulnerability, I guess is the word. So it's quite beautiful, but also frustrating all at the same time.
Scary. Yeah, all of it.
I think that's a part of what Paul was talking about entering into the sufferings of Jesus, or completing the sufferings of Jesus. It doesn't need to be completed. It's a complete work. It's a finished work. And yet, we get to cooperate with this God who is love in ways that maybe don't fit our own logic and reason, but in ways that demonstrate compassion and empathy in the kind of scale of, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. And of course, I guess for me, I'm a hopeful guy. I'm an optimistic guy. That the kind of communion of all saints, or the fact that we will see our loved ones again, that there will be connection at a degree that will even supersede this flesh and blood human connection. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but in the case of, your daughter, there has to be that hope. There has to be that desire and connection that, okay, this isn't the end. And so that's where hope is attached to those that have gone on before us. But it also, I think, helps me be more human in this time that I have on this amazing planet, on this earth. And I think love's just a better way to live. It's just a better choice. Whether God exists or not, love is a better choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've said that. I've gotten in trouble for saying that, but I believe it. If you have a choice between believing in God or love, go with love.
Yeah. And you might find God that way too.
That's right. That's
At
right.
least the one that looks like Jesus.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's good. That's I can see it getting in trouble for saying it, but that's where I'm landing too. So, brother, we've had you for we could I know we could do this a lot longer, but we've had you for over an hour. Thankful for you. Thankful we get to do this together again, and look forward to the next time. Hey, I know we talked tacos last time. Maybe we just I feel like we got to at least acknowledge. You've already shared a taco story. Is there any revelation you've had on the subject since our last conversation?
It's so embarrassing. If I remember correctly, I just I gave a very bland answer, and nothing has changed, man. Me and tacos, I really do like tacos, but I don't like a lot of stuff on them, and I just don't see that changing anytime soon. Whereas my theology seems to be in constant flux, my psychology, my ecclesiology, is constantly in movement. Apparently, my approach to tacos, it just kind of stays the same. I'm a fajita kind of guy, and it's just straight and true.
Hey,
yeah.
Less is more. Less is more.
He's a taco stoic. Definitely a taco stoic.
But I do love tacos. It's just just not a lot in it. But yeah.
I like. Well, it's when you write. That's what you're doing. You're refining it down to the absolute essentials. Those exact right words, the exact right ingredients. So
that's what it is. My culinary approach mirrors my writing approach. So I had never thought of that until today. So
I like it.
I like it. Yeah.
There we go. There's some revelation then. We got some revelation on tacos. That's good stuff.
We did.
Hey, well, listen, Jonathan, we encourage everybody to head to your site, check out your book. I know you've got a fund page, Indiegogo funding page to get your book out there and published. And I think our audience would love to be a part of that. Can you give us a little information about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So I pitched this story to many agents and many publishers. I haven't done that for a few books, but I felt like this story was strong enough. Well, they've all been strong enough, but I really just wanted to be a good steward of this particular one. So, but multiple rejections later, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe crowdfunding it's the best way to go anyhow. Crowdfunding is pretty cool. It allows you to really more intimately interact with your readers, and this kind of things that you don't get to do if you just go straight to a traditional launch. So, yes, it will be, I don't know when this episode will drop, but the 3-week Indiegogo campaign for the book Indigo, it's kind of confusing, Indiegogo for the book Indigo, will start on Tuesday, October 17th, because the crowdfunding people tell me that Tuesday is the best day to start a crowdfunder. So
that's Taco Tuesday, of course.
Oh, well, Taco Tuesday. There you go. Yeah. So that's the plan. If people are listening to this later, they can, obviously jump in on the campaign, or sometime in November, it'll be on all the Amazons and Barnes and Nobles and Apples when we get there. But between now and then, hopefully we'll have a good launch on the crowdfunding site.
Well, we'll see what we can do to try and choreograph the release of this podcast, at least so that it's at some point crossing over those dates. That would be
sure.
Really good. 3-week, you said?
Yeah, it's Tuesday the 17th. But if it drops before, it's fine, because there's already a pre-launch URL up. So the easiest thing is just to go to jonathanfosteronline.com, and you'll be able to be brought up to speed there.
And that's where they find you and sign up for your mailing list as well on all your socials, right?
That's right. You got to go there anyhow. So you can get on my Substack page, and you can see all the cool things. You got to go there anyhow. So you might as well just see what else you can find there.
That's right. There's some other really good books there too.
Well, Jonathan, then we'll ask you to come and join us over on Rethinking God with Tacos Facebook page to meet some of our taco community.
I want to be a part of the taco community. And so I will do that. And so make sure you email me and remind me.
Yeah. I'll definitely press the accept button when I see your ask.
Very good.
No, we really appreciate you, Jonathan. Thank you for being on today, and you're just delightful to talk to. And this book is very special to me. And thank you for allowing us to be a part of promoting it and getting a first glance at it.
Yeah. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you very much. It was really fun to be with you guys again.
Hey guys, so glad you joined us on Rethinking God with Tacos. You can find me, Jason Clark, online at afamilystory.org, where I encourage you to sign up on our mailing list. We send out an email twice a month letting you know about new podcasts, articles, and new books or products that we have coming out. Plus, occasionally I'll keep you up on my schedule where I'm traveling. My Twitter handle is Jason Clark is. I'm on Instagram under the same handle, and you can find me on Facebook as well.
Yeah, and my name is Derek Turner. Jason and I love that you're listening to us. Thank you for all your feedback. Please write in, let us know what's going on in your life. But we are pursuing a mission to help people rethink God, and we thank you for being a part of it. You can find me at Pastor Derek T on all the socials. And then, of course, I pastor a church here in Charlotte, North Carolina called River Church, rivercharlotte.com. Come and join us. We'd love to have you.
Hey, all of these podcasts are available on all the platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google.
Yeah. Hey, make sure and like, share, and throw a review out there.
Let people know.
We love good reviews on the podcast. It helps people find us.
That's right.
So if this is a podcast that you enjoy, then please promote it, share it, give it a good 5-star rating.
I like that. That's a good idea.
Hey, love doing this journey with you. Praying grace and wonder over you today.